Good morning and welcome back to Mobility Matters. I'm your host, Javier Betancourt, Executive Director of the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, or CITT. We're the agency of Miami-Dade County charged with overseeing your half-penny sales tax for transportation. So on this program, of course, we talk about all matters transportation and issues that intersect with transportation. And there's no better person to speak on these issues than a county commissioner, because they too are involved in transportation and all those other subject areas. And I am proud to have today someone who I've known for many years, Commissioner Kevin Cabrera from District 6, excuse me. How are you, Commissioner?
Pretty good. And yourself?
I'm doing great. And thank you for being on the program.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
I have to say, and I'm a little, let's say, subjective here, but I happen to live in District 6, so you have the best district in the county.
I agree with you. I think we definitely have the best district. I would say one of the most diverse districts when you really look at Miami-Dade County.
So you say diverse. I mean, what is your district composed of? What are the cities, and do you have any unincorporated?
So District 6 is about 40% unincorporated, but it starts up north in Hialeah. We've got all of southeast Hialeah, basically south of Hialeah Park, the racetrack. We've got all of downtown Hialeah, most of the Hialeah housing buildings. Then you come down and you have Virginia Gardens, Miami Springs, the airport in its entirety, Flagami, Grapeland, North Coral Gables to about Valencia. Okay. But then you cut over to the side and you get Shenley Park, Coral Terrace, West Miami, and then 67th Avenue in the Palmetto all the way down to Snapper Creek, getting all of Glenver Heights. And we're not stopping just there. We get Mall of the Americas and some of the area in Fontainebleau up until about 92nd Avenue.
Wow. So as you said, very diverse, different types of communities, different demographics.
And in terms of traffic, at least we're right in the middle, right? We're close to everything.
That's right. The heart of the county, really.
The heart of the county and the heart of its economic engine in the airport.
Yeah. So let's talk about the airport. So it's entirely in your district. So obviously that's something you're very close to and work a lot towards. So what are some of the things that are happening with the airport that you're involved in?
Well, I'll tell you, listen, we've heard a lot of people's concerns and we see them. You know, I go through the airport as well and I see some of the issues with the escalators, the elevators. And what I can tell you is, you know, we could sit here and debate about how we got here, but we're moving forward and we're making sure we get things going in the right direction. One of the things I've done is we pass an item, giving the necessary funds for them to replace all of the escalators, all of the elevators, all of the moving walkways, and it's going to be going on throughout the next 2 to 3 years. We've got more there than anywhere else in the county in terms of units, but I can tell you that we're doing about 50 units a year. We're replacing all of the bathrooms. I think we've done about 50 bathrooms out of the 200. We're replacing the entire roof of the terminal. Wow. We've started that now. And then we're also going to be replacing the central terminal, which is the oldest part of the airport. It's the one that comes on all the movies that says Wilcox Field, the original name. So we're working also on getting that going. But again, we understand the concerns. We feel your pain, and we're putting our best foot forward to make sure. I can tell you the airport now has the necessary funding to fix all of these sorts of things.
And is that all airport funding, or are there kind of general funds that go towards that?
So that's a good question, right? Because a lot of folks will ask you, well, you know, why don't you lower my taxes? Why don't you do this? Or the airport generates this amount of money. Well, the airport is what they call an enterprise department. All of the money that is generated there stays there. We don't put money from your property taxes to the airport, and money from the airport does not go to pay for solid waste, for police, or any of these sorts of things. So the airport is paid for by those who use it. If you fly through the airport, you ship things, you decide to go and have lunch there for whatever reason, then you are paying for the airport. Otherwise, they're completely two separate departments. We don't commingle the funds, and we do so to make sure that it's treated as a business unit.
Right. So we jumped straight into, you know, policy and projects. But actually, I think it'd be helpful for people to get to know you a little bit. So what is your background and what led you to become a county commissioner?
So for many years, I worked in logistics. That's even more so why the airport is near and dear to me. I worked in shipping landing gear around the world with many of these companies that do airplane repairs and stuff like that. And then a buddy of mine asked me if I wanted to get involved in politics. And I've always wanted to. I had volunteered. I was kind of like that political junkie that would sit in the kitchen and watch the TV. Kind of a little bit old school, right? I would watch it with my grandparents in Spanish. Yeah. I'd say that I'd watch more Spanish political TV than English. But they asked me to volunteer. I volunteered. I liked it. I tell everyone it was kind of a crazy decision of sorts, at least financially. It was like an 80% pay cut to go work in politics because, as you know, there's long hours. Yeah. You know, not exactly. In this case, it was a campaign. So it was like 1099, no benefits, nothing along those lines. But it was fun, and it's what I enjoy. And from there, I went on to work for different politicians. Most recently, President Trump. I was his state director in 2020 when he was for his reelection efforts in Florida. We had 250 staffers, 48 offices, $40 million budget. We did a great job tripling his margin in Florida from 2016 to 2020. And then I went on and I did some political consulting, and this opportunity arose. I tell everybody, I go, it's something I always thought about doing, but in life, it's they say it's better to arrive on time than to be invited in Spanish, and that's kind of what happened here. The opportunity kind of happened. As we know, somebody else was running for this and they jumped out, and it just kind of worked out.
And how different is it being on one side of that than the other? So you've worked for officials and worked in politics before, but now actually being the elected official, how different is that?
I always say that I think former staffers make the best elected officials. Right, because it's almost like if you're the CEO and you started as a janitor, and then you were maybe a driver, and then you did this, and you did every position up and down. I think it makes you a more wholesome individual. It makes you more knowledgeable. And I think the same thing with an elected official. I think if you start off as a volunteer, which was my first job, and I always celebrate the best job, right? Because you come when you want, you leave when you want, you get pastries, you get coffee, everyone's nice to you, you can't get in trouble. So I started off as a volunteer. I worked as a staffer in all sorts of capacities. And I would say kind of working for a presidential campaign and leading a state, besides being, leading the entire country or being like a chief of staff to the president, they're pretty cool jobs. And I think they teach you all sorts of knowledge that helps you be a better elected official. And also, for lack of a better word, it helps you be able to call out the BS, right? If you have somebody on your team that tells you can't do this, tell them, well, I've done that. I've been there before. Exactly. I know how to do it line by line, which is, for elected officials, everything they're doing that day, include drive time. I've been a driver. I've driven elected officials around in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina on presidential campaigns. So when you've done all of that, it's kind of fun to be on the other side of it and kind of put all these things you learn to use.
That's great. And then it also helps you just kind of hit the ground running, right? Because not only have you done all those jobs, but you obviously are aware of the process, the legislative process. You most likely have a good background on policy. So one of the things I noticed when you came on board is you really did hit the ground running, and you immediately started working on some legislation that ultimately was approved. So let's talk about a few of those related to transportation. Let's start with the PTP, right? The People's Transportation Plan. You proposed a piece of legislation that ultimately was approved. Discuss that and why you felt it was important to do it.
So first of all, transit's very important to me because I rode the bus, and I didn't ride the school bus. I rode the Metro bus because I was in a Magnet program, so I went to South Miami Middle and South Miami High, and I lived out west at the time. So I took the bus every single day, and the bus was late every single day. And when the bus would show up, you'd see your beautiful half penny at work sign on the side of the bus. So, as somebody who rode the bus for 4.5 to 5 years, it was very frustrating, dealing with the transportation. And I've always thought about doing a public records request on myself because I probably logged over 100 calls to the director of transit while I was in high school. Every day when the bus was late, I would call. I never got to speak to the man, but nonetheless, I was that active resident in high school calling every single day.
Man, you would have made a good CITT ambassador, by the way. We'll mention that in a second.
I didn't even know those things existed, right? But
it didn't at the time.
But so it's very important to me. And one of the things that I remember growing up, and I wasn't even a voter at the time, but I remember because, again, I loved watching the news and being informed. I remember the whole thing with the half penny and how it was supposed to be a penny. It was never, that didn't pass, so they did the half. But then when the implementation side of it came around, a lot of the times this money was being, for lack of a better word, commingled. One thing was promised and it was being used for something else. And I understand, because you hear from the commissions past that, it was difficult times in 2008. I get all that. But at the end of the day, what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. And so when we came in, there was something that I'm sure you're very familiar with called unification, right? Which created a unified system that allowed the county to spend money from the people transportation, which was the half penny, that was supposed to be only for new projects on old projects.
Right. To essentially subsidize the existing system.
Exactly. Which it's not that the money's not necessarily being stolen, right? It's all being used for public good, but it's not what was promised. Right. When we voted as voters for this, that's not what was promised. So one of the first things, and by the way, I give credit to Mayor Jimenez and Mayor Cava, who they have weaned off the county off of commingling those funds, and off of, I think at the height of it, it was like $80 million a year. But they weaned them off, and we weren't doing it anymore. But if we're not doing it, let's make sure we make it harder so that we can never do it again.
Right.
Which is why I introduced an item to get rid of unification, so that if we ever wanted to attempt to do it again, we're making it a little bit more difficult. We'd have to pass an item to allow for its use again. So that was one of the first things we did. It was something I talked about on the trail all the time, having been a bus rider myself, and something that was very important to me in terms of trying to bring integrity back and voters' trust back to the half penny.
And listen, we need every penny of that half penny for the new projects, right? We have this thing called the Strategic Miami Area Rapid Transit Plan, the SMART plan, to expand rapid transit to all corners of the county. And there probably aren't enough funds as it is to do that. And so, to share that with the O&M side makes it very difficult to actually enact those projects. And one of those, you may have a couple, but I think at least the East-West Corridor and the Flagler Corridor are both within your district. Are you actively involved in ensuring that those corridors get implemented?
Absolutely.
And what's the status?
Absolutely. And listen, one could say I'm biased because it goes through the heart of my district, but I honestly think that the East-West Corridor is one of the most important corridors because where you have the largest amount of people traveling every day from west to east, and in the afternoon the opposite. So I think it's one of the most important corridors, one of the corridors that would have the most ridership, as we've talked about it numerous times at the commission, at the TPO, even in sunshine meetings with Commissioner Higgins. You'd have over 60% ridership on Flagler on the east-west. And one of the things we're exploring is, for many, many years, nobody wanted to explore the possibility of doing rapid bus or maybe even light rail on Flagler, where you have the highest number of ridership. And some people ask, well, why is ridership so important? Well, besides, obviously, you want to build something that people are going to ride, is that signifies funds.
Yeah.
The more ridership you have, the more funds you can draw down from the federal government, from the state government, and the more that helps us in terms of our local, not having to put as much of a local.
Right. We're able to leverage our half penny by drawing down additional funds.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we, for many years, and not just the commissioners out of my district, but in the other districts, did not want to explore the possibility of the potential of getting rid of a lane on Flagler.
Right.
And I think, we had a sunshine meeting, we explored, and we all agreed, myself, Commissioner Higgins, Commissioner Rodriguez, and Commissioner Bermudez, who have all the portions of Flagler, that we'd explore the possibility. At the very least, we're not saying we're going to do it, but let's do the study. Let's see where this will lead to. Because I think it's important that if, for lack of a better word, we haven't done a whole lot in transportation for the last 30 years. Let's try something different.
Okay. And plugging into those corridors, right? So the corridors are kind of the spine, but then you have to get from the spine into the neighborhoods, into the businesses. And it's something we call the first last mile. And increasingly, that first last mile is going to be bicycle pedestrian. And I know that there are a number of bicycle pedestrian initiatives underway in your district, one of which is near and dear to my heart because I live literally 100 feet from the corridor, and that's the Ludlam Trail. And I know that's also a project that you're actively involved in. So what is that project and what is the status of it? So
the Ludlam Trail is a phenomenal project. It brings a linear park. In my opinion, the underline's great, but I think the Ludlam Trail is more in the heart and soul of our county. It's in a working class neighborhood, and it provides an amenity for working class families that possibly might not have the possibility to do something else, another sort of activity. It goes from Flagler all the way down to Dayland Station, and it provides folks the ability to go walking, bike riding, running, whatever it may be along that trail. There's going to be bridges in all the major thoroughfares. But one of the things that we've done a little bit different, I give credit to Commissioner Sosa, is that they were able to leverage developers to build portions of it, right? So there's areas where you have enough space to build affordable and workforce housing. And so we were able to leverage the land that we were giving to developers to do those housing projects to make them fund their portion of the trail. Again, trying to make sure we reduce the cost on the taxpayers on funding these sorts of things is, we have a few of these housing projects and then they are building out the trail for their portions. And some of them are building the bridges as well, which again is one of the most expensive parts of this is building bridges over Coral Way, over Bird, over all the major thoroughfares, because you obviously don't want somebody running across. Or, at the end of the day, not only do you not want somebody running across, nor do you want them having to wait. Yeah. Right? Because if they have to wait for Bird or Coral Way, one of these main streets, to get a crossing signal of sorts, that'll take forever.
Right. And it slows down the traffic, right? So it's not good for the cars either.
Yeah. And I would say one of the things that kind of goes to that last mile of sorts is the trolleys, the circulators that came a part of the half penny, right? That each city has their portion. I believe it's 25%, right, that they get? Or
It was 20%, but as 3 new cities incorporated, it's more like 22, 23. Yeah.
So that percentage that they get to have what everybody sees, the trolleys or the freebies or whatever it may be, each city is obviously different. We passed an item as well instructing the mayor and the transportation department to do a study, because what I've found is there's a lot of times there's not connectivity, and it happens a lot sometimes with the smaller cities, right? Like it does great in your 2-mile radius, but if you're trying to go to the city next door, there should be some level of connectivity, and we're trying to figure out a way in which we can get all the cities to work together to have some level of connectivity. Maybe each city goes one stop into the next city so that you can get into that new system. Again, it's about trying to make it easier for riders, making it seamless.
Of course.
It's not about us. At the end of the day, it's about the rider and making sure that wherever it is that they're going, whether it's work, pleasure, or maybe it's a medical appointment, making sure it's seamless and easy and as simple as possible for them to use our system.
And there's physical connectivity where you literally want the circulators to kind of connect and maybe even overlap. And then there's technological connectivity, right? So we're all increasingly kind of addicted to our apps.
Yeah.
And the county has a great app, that has a wealth of information, but we could do a better job of having that municipal information on that app. So if I want to get from point A to point B, I go to one app and it tells me how to get there. It doesn't matter who's running the service. And you have real-time data. So I understand that there was also some legislation filed recently, may have been Commissioner Higgins, to ensure that the cities are providing that data to the county.
I believe it was Commissioner Higgins. She's the chair of our transportation committee, so she's very much involved in all these sorts of things. And it's a great idea because, again, you don't want to have 34 different apps.
Right.
The resident, the tourist, whomever is visiting our city, that's too complicated to have. You got to make it seamless. You got to make it easy. As it is, we have an issue with folks riding transportation in our county and in our cities. So let's make it a little bit easier. Let's encourage them. Let's not discourage them. And I think part of that is making sure that you have one app. That app has the information for all these different circulators and freebies and everything in there, and we can make it a little bit more easier for our residents to use.
Speaking of making things easier for folks, you also filed legislation related to the Golden Passport to make that easier to apply for. You want to speak to that?
Absolutely. So one of the things I found was a lot of seniors were complaining that they have to go to downtown Miami, or we do provide services where we go to senior centers, we go to the comedores, as they say, where they provide lunch to them, and even to some of their housing buildings, and we'll bring the Golden Passport folks to sign them up. But there's only so many of these we can do, right? There's not enough, to go around. So what we're trying to do is figure out a way in which you can use your ID. You can use your ID for almost anything, right? But figure out a way in which you use your Florida driver's license or an identification that has your date of birth and has your address in Miami-Dade County to ride the bus. Because ultimately, if you're 65, then you shouldn't have an issue, right? It's for anybody who's 65 plus. It's not means tested or anything like that. So again, it's trying to make it simpler for seniors to ride, trying to eliminate the bureaucracy. Obviously, we've got to make sure we still get our counts, because that's how we get funding from the feds and from the state. So trying to make sure we still get our counts for the folks that are riding the bus, but trying to make it a little bit easier and not cumbersome where they have to go to downtown or have to wait for us to come around their building to sign them up for the Golden Passport.
No, I think it's fantastic and well overdue. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And by the way, for those who don't know what the Golden Passport is, it's essentially a fare free for seniors over 65, and it's subsidized with the half penny sales tax, one of the original promises.
And it's as well for the veterans as well.
Okay, so this is also going to apply for the Patriot Passport?
Well, I'm saying it's not, but I'm saying there's a similar service for veterans as well.
For veterans. That one is income.
That one will be a little bit more difficult for us to do this, because obviously on your ID you won't be able to identify all those sorts of things.
Okay, well, we'll start thinking about that one, finding a way to make it happen. So also thinking about technology, of course, there's this idea of smart signals. One of the other original promises of the People's Transportation Plan was Advanced Traffic Management System, ATMS, which sounds complicated, but essentially it means making our signals smarter so that we can improve the efficiency, right, and get more cars through intersections. But there have been some issues with that as of late, and I know you're focused on this.
So as you know, and as so many of our residents or anybody who's been in our county has faced, you've been at a red light and then you see 2 green lights ahead, or you have a green light and you have a red light, the next one. That's not smart signals. That's the opposite of that. That's, for lack of a better, dumb signals, right? And you spend more gas. So if you want to talk about people that care about the environment, you're using more gas, a bigger carbon footprint. But at the end of the day, you're also spending more time. And is fixing this going to, shorten an hour of your day? No, but it's going to give you some sense of relief. And I think we already spend enough times in our car. This will reduce that a little bit. So again, when this was originally passed, is about making sure that when you get a green light, the next 5 lights or however many they may be are green, so that you're traveling in one direction. It's seamless. And when it's red for everything. It's red for the next couple of lights as well, so that you actually have time to move. It's not stop and go traffic,
right,
which is what people complain about all the time. A few years ago, we gave out a contract. We've got 2,900 signals in our county. They were supposed to do over 500 a year, and they did 200 in 5 years. They blamed all sorts of things like COVID. But what I can tell you, and what kind of goes to the crux of what I think folks should be inspired or should feel good about this commission. And again, it's not necessarily saying something about the previous ones. I'm just saying this one's a little bit different. And I think we have a sense of urgency to get things done. We're not going to be here for 30 years. We're going to be here for 8 years. And we want to make sure that in those 8 years, we actually move our county forward and get some of these issues solved that we've been talking about for 30 years, such as this. So we had a company that wasn't working. We eliminated them. And now we're working with the company that was ranked second to see if we can provide a final solution for our residents. Again, it's about our chairman speaks a lot about moving at the speed of business, and that is what I think we're doing here. We identified a problem. This company wasn't able to do it, so now we have found a different one who was also part of that competitive bid process and actually ranked number 1 in technical, number 2 in the funding, and it is actually the only company that's currently working with us because they had done a pilot program for, I think it was 200 lights or so. And making sure that we try to get this done in the quickest way possible to provide some sense of relief. Transportation is not something that we're going to fix by fixing a signal or by bringing a circulator. It's everything. It's an all-in-one approach, right? It's every little thing has its every little, like they say in Spanish, every piece of rice, putting your little piece of sand into the pot of sorts. And here, if you could,
puzzle, right? You got different pieces of the puzzle.
And if you can shave off 10 minutes off your drive by fixing traffic signals, and then another 10 minutes by fixing the circulators, and then build a transit line here and another one there, before you know it, we're getting to real savings of time, maybe 30 minutes, maybe closer to 45. So again, it's about working on all these different pieces of the puzzle, like you said, to try to fix it and have a transportation system that really works for everybody.
So we were talking about trying to speed traffic through the intersections. Now let's talk about slowing down traffic. So I know you're working on another piece of legislation to actually slow down traffic where we don't want people speeding, which is through the neighborhoods.
Exactly. So residential areas in Miami-Dade County have kind of varying speeds right now, right? You've got places like West Miami, South Miami, Coral Gables that have 25 miles an hour in residential neighborhoods. And then you've got areas like UMSA, which is unincorporated Miami-Dade, that's 35. So a perfect example of this is if you're traveling through my district, you could be in West Miami, unincorporated, South Miami, and unincorporated within like 10 blocks. So you're traveling down these 10 blocks.
I do it every day.
and you go from 25 miles an hour speed limit to 35 to 25 to 35 to 25. That's a little wild, right? Besides the fact that the lower we lower these speed limits, we've seen that it saved lives as well.
Right.
These are neighborhoods. We're not talking about Bird Road, Coral Way, or 8th Street. We're talking about residential neighborhoods and streets abutting schools and recreational facilities and places where kids congregate. So per state law, if we want to lower the speed limit, we have to do a study by the police department. We pass an item that instructs the Miami-Dade Police Department to review potentially lowering from 35 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour the speed limit in all residential areas in unincorporated Miami-Dade, all areas abutting schools, parks, and rec centers for children. Obviously, we're not talking about main thoroughfares; those are exempt.
Sure,
but it also provides some level of uniformity. And again, it's about trying to get to that vision zero that we talk about a lot, which is having 0 fatalities. And this would help go a long way towards that.
I think that would be great. If you need one to start with, South Waterway Drive in your district.
Very familiar.
So you are working on a lot of different things. There are lots of challenges, lots of needs, lots of opportunities. You said you have now, 6 more years left? Assuming re-election.
Assuming re-election, 6 years.
Okay, so not a lot of time to accomplish all these things. if you had a magic wand and you could have one thing implemented, one project, one program, one service to kind of leave behind as your legacy in transportation and mobility, what would it be?
I would say the East-West Corridor.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah.
I think the East-West Corridor would provide a sense of relief for residents who are. Listen, my mother's done that for 35 years.
Yeah.
You know, she's done the East-West Corridor and spent over. You know, she's figured out a way now to take the Metro Rail, but it's not perfect.
It's not
if we had something East-West, where you wouldn't have to sit an hour and a half on what's basically a parking lot on the 836, it would be huge. So I think if we had a magic wand and money was not an issue, nor permitting, nor anything, and we were able to get the East-West Corridor done like this, I think that would provide a huge sense of relief for our residents. And I think that it would really instill a level of confidence in government that you haven't seen before.
So since we don't have a magic wand and we want to see the East-West Corridor implemented, what can we do? Or are we doing everything at this point to move that project along? I mean, is there more that we can do at the CITT, people watching in the community?
I will say we're doing, you know, Commissioner Higgins does a great job of going to Washington and trying to draw down funds from, you know, the infrastructure package that was passed. We've worked with Congressman Diaz-Balart's office. He has a high position in Congress. He's one of our highest ranking members. He's actually, I think, our highest ranking member down here in South Florida. Yeah. And
he's on the transportation.
And he's on the transportation committee, former chairman. Right. So he's been very helpful in drawing down funds as well. So I will tell you that we are, if we've ever been in a perfect position of sorts to try to get this done, I think it's now. I think it's sort of the perfect storm, but a good storm. Of
the stars are aligning.
Exactly, the stars are aligning on trying to get this done.
Right.
And I think you have the will. I think you have a will on the commission that you haven't seen before in terms of moving transportation forward. And I think, again, not trying to say anything about the previous one, but I think it's part of, it's gotten also, I think there's been a significant change. And I would say in the folks that sat on there versus the folks that sit there now. And I think that you really do have a very transportation forward thinking mentality. And
I would hope that you also have the community's support along that corridor. I know some corridors are a little more controversial. You know, the city of Miami Beach came out against the Bay Link proposal, for instance, which I'm still trying to wrap my mind around. But I don't know that you have that community opposition or that split on Flagler, or do you? Are there differences of opinion on what should be done?
What I would say is that the person that lives on Flagler right now in a building and pays, let's say, $300 or $400 for a car, when you add insurance, gas.
If you're lucky, my friend.
If you're lucky.
These days.
Let's round it to 500. Yeah. You know, tell them that they can save $500 a month. That can help towards possibly going on a vacation, towards starting a college fund for their kids. If we're able to build this and they're able to get rid of their car, I think that's huge.
And shave 30 minutes off their commute.
Exactly. And I say the financial side of it, but what you're saying is the quality of life issue, which I think is very important. My mom, again, who has figured out a way to take the Metro Rail, tells me it's just about the same time for her. But she says now she can read a book.
Right.
Now she can, you know, pay her bills because she still uses a checkbook. She's a little bit old school. But you can do other things, whereas sitting behind the wheel and having that pressure of being in stop and go traffic is really not healthy for anyone.
Absolutely. Listen, Commissioner, we're about out of time. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to mention or discuss.
All I'd say is I'd encourage folks to get involved. Yeah. I got involved as an activist, as a volunteer, and I encourage others because I think it really makes for a better democracy when you have people that are involved. It doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree, but it's important that you voice your opinion. And there are opportunities for people to get involved in this space, right? So I know you have appointees appointments that you make to the TPO and to the CITT. And other organizations. Are there open opportunities now that people might tap into, or how can they learn more about those? They can definitely contact our office at 305-267-6377 or District 6 at miamidade.gov if they want to send over their resume, some of the board appointments they might be interested in. I'm not sure right off the cuff here which ones are open or which ones are not, but I definitely know we do have some openings on our board appointments, and we're happy to always review qualified folks that we can get plugged in. Thank you. And on that note, you don't have a vacancy on the CITT. We have a great member, so thank you for that appointment of member Robert Ruano, a very active member of the CITT. But we do have 3 vacancies on the CITT in other districts. So if you're watching this and you're interested in being a part of the solution, please visit our website as well, miamidade.gov/CITT.
and learn more about those 3 vacancies and other opportunities to volunteer with us, including the CITT Ambassador Program. We didn't talk about it, but when you were young, this would have been great for you. If you ride the system, you become a CITT ambassador, you fill out a survey on an app every day, you get points for that, you exchange those points for rewards like free transit passes, free rideshare rides, free scooter rides, whatever it may be. So you would have been the perfect candidate.
I would have been.
And you still may be. So spread the news.
Well, I live off of 8th Street, right? So I suppose I could probably take the bus.
Absolutely. Please do. Please do. And encourage others to.
Thank you for your work on the CITT and for your work here on the Mobility Podcast. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
And continue to do. And I also want to thank our partners in this endeavor, Miami's community newspapers, for continuing to host us here and produce the program. Folks, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.